Hello, my loves. As always, I hope that this video finds you well and in excellent spirits. So this video is all about the upcoming full moon in Leo happening on Wednesday, February 12th at 8:53 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. All right, so we are making our way through 2025 and we have approached the full moon of February. Now, the one thing that immediately stuck out to me when I was preparing the information for this video is that this particular full moon is very much in alignment with Valentine's Day, all right, for better or for worse, depending on what you think about it, right? But more so than that, right? Valentine's Day is, in my opinion, very commercial, very sort of artificial. However, this full moon is really going to have you tap into your heart space. Now, as beautiful as that may sound, and as, apropos as that may sound, given that Valentine's Day is only 2 days later, this emphasis on your heart space may feel a little frustrating. It may feel a little scary even, because this is sort of calling on you to not only assess what's really in your heart, right? For most, I think we have a good idea of what's in our heart, what we want, what we desire. But the point of this full moon, if I had to sum it up, is having the courage to still follow your heart, even if whatever is going on around you isn't necessarily in alignment with what you want. The phrase that comes to mind is, this is a marathon, not a sprint, right? And whether the subject of this full moon for you is romantic relationships, or perhaps it's something that you just truly desire, something that you really want, it's about going the distance. It's about, staying the course, and it's about continuing to have the courage to follow your heart. All right, so if you want to know more about what this full moon in Leo has to offer, stick around. You definitely don't want to miss this. All right, so let's begin with some basic information. Let's talk about full moon energy and Leo energy. So, full moon energy. Full moons are when the sun and the moon are in opposition. Think of it as like a seesaw, right? So it's this balancing act, if you will, between the energies of the sun and the energies of the moon, right? So with the full moon being in Leo, it means that the sun is in Aquarius, hence why we're in Aquarius season right now. And when we talk about Leo and Aquarius energy, right, a lot of people will call them sister signs, right? It's all about Aquarius energy is the energy of the collective. It's the energy of fitting in, right? And this is where our consciousness is, because the sun is currently in the sign of Aquarius. And on the opposite end, with the full moon in Leo, this is where our emotions are. And emotionally, Leo likes to stand out. Leo likes to really follow its heart, no matter what no matter what anyone else is doing, saying, or thinking, right? Like Leo is main character energy. And so when we have this full moon in Leo, we're sort of torn between standing out and fitting in, doing what everyone else is doing, really tapping into the energy of the collective, or sort of being a lone wolf and following our heart, as scary as that may be. And so this full moon is going to really tug at our heartstrings, perhaps literally, right? Full moons are the point in the lunar cycle where the moon is completely illuminated. So it signifies illumination, like whatever's been in the dark is now coming to light under the light of the full moon. And culmination in terms of manifestation. This is when our manifestations come to fruition. And so this full moon in Leo will perhaps show us what's really in our hearts, especially if we've been denying it. Like if there's something that we've really kept deep within the recesses of our heart, that we've really kept under wraps, this full moon is kind of gonna rip the Band-Aid off or rip the cover off of that, right? And so this may be triggering, it may be uncomfortable, and it may really have you in your feelings. Full moons tend to have people in their feelings. It's a very sensitive kind of time, and it typically evokes an emotional response to external triggers, right? So we're seeing things that perhaps we've kept in the dark. Our hearts are going to be speaking to us so loudly to the point where we just can't ignore it. And on the other hand, in terms of culmination, this full moon may signify a time when a creative endeavor comes to a completion, right? I spoke about just now how the full moon is when your manifestations come to fruition. So if there's a creative project you've been working on, that could finally be finished. Or having the confidence and this really emphasized sense of self could also be how the full moon in Leo may feel or may represent for you, right? Leo is about courage, it's about confidence, and you may find that this full moon has you feeling yourself, has you feeling like putting yourself out there, expressing yourself unapologetically, right? As scary as that may be. So either way, this full moon is going to show us a lot about ourselves, about what's in our hearts, or perhaps how we've been working towards something that's truly the most authentic representation of who we are, right? So, as a segue, let's talk about Leo energy. I personally love Leo energy, and I find that people either love it or hate it. Or I should say, when it comes to Leo sun sign energy, people either love it or hate it, right? It's heart-centered, it's childlike, it's fun, it's expressive. It's not so serious, it's not mired in details. It's just, I want it, I have it. Or I want it, I go after it. And listening to your heart, right? Allowing your heart to drive the car. And having the courage to follow your heart no matter what. Expressing yourself, being loud, allowing yourself to be seen. Those are all characteristics of the Leo energy signature, right? And so this is the energy that's going to be played up during this full moon in Leo, right? The other thing I love about Leo energy is that it's warm, it's generous, right? As much as Leos love to be main character and love to be attention seeking, right? And I don't mean any shade by that. That's just how Leos roll. As much as they love attention, they love warmth. They love being generous. And that childlike, generous energy is just so warm. It's so inviting. It's also magnetic in a way, right? Because people like to gravitate toward things. The ruler of Leo is the sun, and the sun shines unapologetically. Everything revolves around the sun, hence that Leo main character energy. So this is the energy that's at our fingertips for this full moon. So you'll want to pay attention to wherever Leo is in your natal chart. This will let you know what will be illuminated, or should I say what area of life will be illuminated under this full moon. All right, so now let's talk about the numerology and get a little more granular in terms of the energy for this full moon. All right, so I personally love integrating numerology into these explanations because it just gives us so much more information. So this full moon in Leo is happening at the 24th degree of Leo. And so this full moon is sponsored by the number 6. Okay, so 2 + 4 is 6. So the energy of the number 6 bodes so well with the energy of Leo because the number 6 in numerology is the embodiment of the heart. Okay, so right off the bat, right, we're understanding based off the astrology and the numerology that this full moon has everything to do with heart. It has everything to do with perhaps our romantic life, our desires, right? Whatever is in the deepest parts of our heart, which could be quite emotional, like I said before. But apart from the number 6 just being the embodiment of the heart, it represents unconditional love, the ability to support, nurture, and heal, compassion, empathy, being of service to others, partnerships, especially emotional ones, caring, healing, having an open heart, letting your guard down, right? I hope you're picking up what I'm putting down, right? It's super sensitive. It's super lovey-dovey, okay? And again, not just because this bodes well with Valentine's Day, but the astrology, everything else that's going on around this full moon kind of plays into this as well. And I'll get to that in a little bit, okay? So there is this undertone of romance, of warmth, of generosity, of caring when it comes to this full moon. Essentially, this is going to have you in your feelings. And it's like, How would I describe it? I feel like that sigh kind of said it all. It's that soft side, the softer side of us, and revealing that softer side, right? Because we're talking about a full moon. Now, Leo is all about courage. If you remember in The Wizard of Oz, it was the cowardly lion, right? Lions represent courage, so that was kind of a paradox, right? This lion was cowardly. But matters of the heart, especially in the way that society has conditioned us, a lot of us have hardened our hearts. A lot of us are afraid to let our guards down. A lot of us are, jaded. We are pessimistic. We are cold, right? All of those adjectives are really the opposite of Leo energy. It takes courage to be vulnerable. It takes courage to follow your heart. It takes courage, definitely, to let your guard down. And perhaps this full moon is going to show you perhaps where you've been very cold, where you've been less than generous, where you've been jaded and guarded, especially when it comes to not only the softer side of you, but the softer side of your relationships. And again, look at where Leo is in your natal chart. This will let you know what area of life this full moon will be happening, right? And so it's really important to not only feel whatever you're feeling and, work through whatever emotions come up at this full moon, but to recognize and be conscious of what's truly in your heart. Relationships are such a point of contention, specifically romantic ones. If, you're a hopeless romantic, yet you've been hurt, you've been cheated on and all the things, it's very easy to close your heart. It's very easy to be cold, right? To keep your guard up. But it's almost like this full moon may be prying it open, right? That moat and that barricade and that fortress that you have around your heart, this full moon may really have you let that gate down. And, that takes courage. It really does. And so pay attention to whatever comes up at this full moon, especially emotionally speaking. All right. So in terms of the astrology associated with the number 6, it's associated with the sign of Virgo, which is the 6th sign of the zodiac. Now, Virgo doesn't necessarily get the reputation of being like lovey-dovey, right? However, what I do want to emphasize with this undercurrent of Virgo energy, as it is expressed by the number 6, is that Virgo is not only, it represents like your daily routine, like things that you do ritualistically on a daily basis. And it's also about perfection. And when I say perfection, I don't mean nitpicking and trying to make something perfect. I mean working at something it's like perfecting your craft, right? And so this lets us know that with this energy that is at our disposal for us to open our hearts and let our guards down, it's not something that you just do, right? It's something perhaps that you have to work at. And that's perfectly fine. Imagine that around this full moon, you encounter someone who really makes your heart sing. Or maybe you reconnect with someone who perhaps may be a great fit for you. And this bodes well with Venus about to go retrograde, right? Which I'll get to in a little bit. But no one is saying that you have to approach this person all guards down, no boundaries, with open arms. That would kind of be foolish a little bit, right? It's a process. It is something that you have to work at intentionally, right? You have to be conscious and intentional about, okay, I'm going to let my guard down a little bit. Let's see how this works. Let's see how this person responds to it. Okay, this worked out well. So now I can continue to let my guard down, continue to let this person in and have the courage to do so, right? That's how that undercurrent of that Virgo energy, again, as expressed via the number 6, operates with this full moon. Now, the number 6 is also associated with Taurus and Libra. Both of those zodiac signs are ruled by Venus. So even though this is happening in the sign of Leo, we already have an undercurrent of Virgo energy. We've got this undercurrent of Taurus and Libra energy, right? And of Venus. So the number 6, as expressed via Taurus, right, is all about value and it's all about comfort. Okay. And so Venus wants to be comfortable. Venus wants to have the love. It also evokes appreciation and gratitude, right? So these are some of the things that may be coming up at this full moon. And then Venus, as expressed via Libra, is about fairness, reciprocity. Now, I don't know what could be more important in relationships than that. I mean, there are tons of other things, right? But reciprocity is super important. It's going to be very hard to let your guard down if whoever you're dealing with is not meeting you halfway, or if they're giving you reasons to keep your guard up, right? It's got to be reciprocal. And this energy of fairness and equality and equanimity are also going to be undercurrents of this full moon in Leo. And then finally, not finally, next, when it comes to the tarot card associated with the number 6, it is the card of the Lovers. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. Now, the Lovers doesn't just mean a romantic relationship. One of the most important characteristics of the Lovers card in the tarot is the concept or the idea of choice. To love someone, to be in a relationship with them is a choice. What do we choose? Now, this is extremely important because are you going to choose to follow your heart, or are you going to choose to remain guarded and jaded? Not only that, are you going to choose this person, right? Inherent in choice is also the element of sacrifice a lot of times, because if we choose something, it's often to the exclusion of something else. So, the phrase that's coming to mind right now is that fear and love cannot coexist. They can't exist at the same time. You can't be fearful and experience love at the same time. Now, you may think you can, but to be honest, you can't. And to choose love, right, and which has everything to do with this full moon, is to the exclusion of fear. And that is the quintessential energy when it comes to Leo. Leo is about courage, right? It's about, I'm going to go after this no matter what. It doesn't matter if I'm afraid. It doesn't matter if I've been hurt in the past. It doesn't matter. I choose love. And thereby I do not choose fear. Powerful, extremely powerful. And then finally, I like to look at what's called the Sabian symbols for each moon that I discuss. And the Sabian symbols essentially give an archetypal story to each degree of the zodiac. So the Sabian symbol for 24 degrees of Leo is a large camel crossing a vast and forbidding desert. This is sort of what I was alluding to before, where it's a marathon, not a sprint. Because choosing love, I'm committing to having a romantic relationship. I'm committing to opening my heart. I'm committing to following whatever's in my heart. Girl, that can really feel like crossing a damn desert, right? It could feel like there isn't an end in sight. It could feel like there is no oasis on the horizon, right? And having the courage to still move forward, having the courage to still push ahead during difficult times, or keep the faith even when everything around you suggests otherwise. That is the energetic underpinning of this full moon. So again, to use the example I was talking about before, maybe you've got someone who's orbited into your reality, but maybe this relationship is not going the way that you want it to. Maybe you've got a whole bunch of fears coming up, right? Because again, this full moon is going to shine a light on perhaps where you are not courageous, or perhaps where you are fearful. Maybe you're fearful of abandonment. Maybe you are fearful of getting cheated on. Maybe you're fearful of being vulnerable and not being accepted. Yeah, you're going to feel all those things with this full moon. It's not going to be necessarily roses and rainbows, but understanding that by choosing love, by making the choice to choose love over fear, you agree to traverse this desert. You agree to say, listen, I don't care what's going on right now. I'm still going to work at, right, that Virgo energy I was talking about before. I choose to work at this. I choose to perfect this. Okay? It could feel like an arduous journey, but you kind of just have to have the confidence to keep going. And that's where the sense of frustration can come in. I mean, if you're someone who perhaps is uncoupled and you'd like to be coupled, but you feel like you've had to kiss a lot of frogs and you have yet to meet your prince. Or maybe you're in a relationship, right? And it's just not going the way that you want it to. You're not experiencing the things that you want. Committing to that, choosing love, choosing the warmth and the generosity and having the courage to open your heart is what this full moon is going to be asking of you. It's what it's going to be showing you. Okay? So when it comes to numerology and the number 6, that's the energy that we're dealing with. All right, so now let's talk about the astrology related to this full moon in Leo. All right, so concerning the astrology, there's 3 things that I want to discuss. Number 1, the sun in Aquarius. Number 2, Venus retrograde. And number 3, the full moon square Uranus. So, as I mentioned before, the full moon is when the sun and the moon are in opposition. So if the moon is in Leo, that means that the sun is in Aquarius, okay? Hence why we're still in Aquarius season. Now, Aquarius is a sign of improvement, innovation, and looking to the future, right? With Aquarius being an air sign, it's all about our thought process. It's all about our mental activities. And so that's the filter through which we are looking and examining these matters of the heart that will be coming up at this full moon in Leo. So it's almost like whatever's coming up at this full moon, and it will likely have a romantic or at least a relationship undertone to it. The sun in Aquarius is sort of going to have you be in the mindset of, okay, how can I improve this? How can I do something different? Right? Aquarius is quirky, it's different, it's unique. How can you put your own sort of spin on this? Essentially, what works best for you in relationships? That's what the sun in Aquarius has to contribute to this full moon in Leo. Okay? Now, next, I want to discuss Venus retrograde. Now, Venus will not officially go retrograde until March 1st. However, currently, and at the time of this full moon in Leo, Venus is in its pre-shadow period. So it is getting ready to go retrograde. Now, whenever you hear retrograde, you immediately think Mercury, for most of us, right? And a lot of times people say Mercury retrograde, oh, your ex is going to come back. That's not necessarily true. And it usually doesn't happen that way unless Mercury is in like your 5th house, or, you know, that particular Mercury retrograde is in your 5th house or your 7th house, right? However, Venus retrograde, that's definitely when an ex may pop up. But more likely, you you may encounter past relationship issues coming up in the form of new people. So you may be meeting someone new, someone you've never dealt with before, yet they're the same blueprint or they've read from the same book, perhaps as your ex or whomever, right? It's that issue that's coming up, not necessarily the person. And so again, looking through the filter of Aquarius energy, since the sun is in Aquarius, all right, this issue or even this person is coming back up, right? How can I do things differently this time? And then that full moon energy in Leo was like, listen, maybe before you were guarded, maybe before you were acting from a place of fear or making decisions based on not wanting to be hurt or not wanting to be abandoned, right? That full moon is like, listen, if you want to do things differently, you may have to let your guard down. You really may have to be a little more vulnerable. You may have to open your heart this time instead of approaching this person or this situation with a closed, hard heart, right? So that's kind of how the astrology can play out with this. And then finally, we have the full moon is going to be square Uranus at the time of this full moon, right? And so essentially this means expecting the unexpected. Uranus is now direct in Taurus. And so not only are there going to be perhaps some surprises, some sudden changes, but there's also going to be this really big push or maybe even a kick in the ass out of your comfort zone. Everything about this full moon is telling you to do things differently, act differently, make decisions from a different kind of place. Okay? And so apart from that, Uranus really requires you to tap into your intuition, Like, where's your intuition guiding you, right? Perhaps your intuition is like, listen, I know the desires of your heart. I know that you want to have something different, so I'm going to have you do something different. I'm going to have you go in a different direction, talk to a different person, or talk to this person in a different kind of way, which may make you feel uncomfortable, which may make you feel scared. But that full moon in Leo is like, listen, man up, woman up, have the courage to do things differently so that you can have something different, right? The other thing I'll say about the moon square Uranus is that it may force you to take action when you probably don't want to. And this kind of makes sense, right? Especially if you're coming from a place of all men are cheaters, all women are gold diggers, everything that you're hearing now in society. And side note, it's like the state of relationships, at least between men and women, right? It's like kind of in the dumpster right now. Like, you have each distrustful of the other. You have people bringing out the worst, right? And social media, I feel like, really exacerbates this because, social media favors, extremism. And so the more extreme your stories can be on social media, the more views it gets. So people are playing up the very worst parts of relationships. And the more you consume this kind of information, the more it may reaffirm why you keep your guard up, why you don't trust anybody, all of the things, right? But given the astrology, the way everything is set up, this full moon may have you doing something you don't want to do. Being vulnerable, opening your heart, entertaining someone you might not have entertained, letting that guard down. Even though logically you may not want to, that muscle memory that you have that keeps you guarded may really provide resistance to what the universe is trying to have you do at this time. So this is what I'll say with respect to this full moon. Do the thing. Do the thing. Let your guard down. Have the courage to go the distance when it comes to these things. Everything around us is changing. 2025 is a year of dynamic change and transformation. And the purpose of this particular full moon in Leo is like, okay, the universe is saying, all right, in February, you know what we're changing? We're changing the way that we think and act with respect to relationships. We're letting our heart drive the car instead of our brain and our jaded muscle memory, right? That is the subject matter of this full moon. So you're going to have to do something different in order to receive something different or have something different. All right, so that's the astrology. So now let's talk about the manifestation process when it comes to this full moon in Leo. All right, so as I mentioned before, the full moon is the part of the lunar phase where manifestations come to fruition. So to use an analogy, at the new moon, you would plant the apple seed. At the full moon, you would pick the fully formed apple off the apple tree. All right, so full moons are a time of observation. Again, it's the time when the moon is the brightest. It sheds light on things that have been in the dark. So take the time to observe what is coming to light. And with everything that I mentioned before, with this being heart-centered, relationship-focused, requiring you to have a lot of courage, there's going to be a lot to observe. So don't concern yourself so much with taking action right now. And this is important because Venus is getting ready to go retrograde. And with Venus being the ruler of relationships, taking action with relationships of any kind is going to it's going to start to get a little frustrated because Venus is starting to slow down. And number two, at the time of this particular full moon, Mars is still retrograde. So having the energy to do something new, start something new, is just not going to be there either. So again, sit and observe, take notes. What's coming up either in your environment, in your relationships, or with respect to your emotions. Suss out what you don't feel good about. Or perhaps what needs changing. Remember, the sun is in Aquarius. It's all about innovation and changing things and improving things. So take the time to observe. One of the things I love to do with the full moon, I like to light a meditation candle, get into, I typically meditate in the morning. But at the full moon, I like to meditate that night. Light a candle, get my journal, meditate on absolutely nothing, actually. And just allow yourself to feel whatever you're feeling. Observe the thoughts that come into your mind's eye and then assess them, right? What's working for you, what's not? What do you want to change? I think that's the best use of the energy for this full moon in Leo. All right, my loves. So that concludes this video on this full moon in Leo. All right, I sincerely hope that you were able to get at least one important piece of information that you could use going into this full moon and beyond. All right, the one thing I'll leave you with is this: don't be afraid of what's in your heart. Don't be afraid of love. Don't be afraid of vulnerability. Is it an easy road to travel? Of course not. We all know this, especially if we are adults and we've been through a couple of relationships in our lives. But things are changing, and I want you to understand this. Nothing happens in a vacuum. Things are changing, and how we view and experience everything in this world is going to change starting this year. And so if you do the work now, when things do shift, you'll find it easier to attune to the frequency of the things that you want, relationships included. And that is what this full moon in Leo is giving you the opportunity to start doing, to start attuning to the frequency of love, of what's in your heart, of warmth, of generosity, of love the way that love was designed. All right, so hopefully you use it to your advantage in that way. All right, my loves, thanks so much for tuning in, and I'll see you in my next video. Take care.